Hi, my name's Dr Adam Booth and welcome to another locked down edition of Quantum Source. Now, today's theme is something that was really easy to take for granted in the pre-lockdown world, but actually becomes really critical in the situation that we find ourselves in today. Whenever a supermarket manager promises that there'll be bread back on the shelves in a week's time, or when a politician promises 100,000 coronavirus tests a day and full personal protective equipment for NHS staff, there's obviously a big logistical burden that comes in on that. Someone somewhere has to manage the operational side, they have to manage the supply chains. And so to appreciate the real fundamental mind-blowing process that goes on in the background there, we're going to be talking to someone who's a real expert in this operational management side. She is Dr Luisa Huatuco. She's a senior lecturer in operations management at the University of York in their management school. And so in just a sec, we're going to be giving Louisa a call. However, fascinating facts were always best served with something slightly refreshing, and so my recommended source for this particular quantum source is a bottle of this, for two reasons really. Obviously, Saltaire Brewery have their supply chains nailed because they're still able to deliver beers to the Leeds area, and this was, along with 60 odd of his mates, this was a delivery I took just the other day, so thanks Saltaire. The other thing is, this is Saltaire Titus, and Titus Salt was one of these Victorian industrialists who actually founded the town of Saltaire, and he was a guy who knew a thing or two about supply chains. He moved his entire mill close to the Leeds-Liverpool Canal. He built a town for his workers so that they wouldn't have to commute very far. So, he knew a thing or two about supply chains back in the Victorian ages. So, a little tribute to Titus Salt and Saltaire Brewery. And with that, I'm going to give Louisa a call and we'll see you in a minute. Cheers. And hello Louisa, there you are. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. So trying to keep him motivated about things that are going around in the world as well. So checking on the news every now and then. I'm like, I'm going to go back to my marking now. Yeah.
It really comes to something when university marking is the preferred solution.
Yeah, definitely.
So here's a question for you then. If you were managing your own supply chain, what source would you make sure was absolutely still available?
Oh, definitely. I have a sample. Actually, it's my last sachet of this sauce, which is called, it's a Peruvian sauce. It's Huancaína sauce.
Huancaína?
Yes. So it comes from a place in Peru called Huancayo, which is in the highlands of Peru, where my parents come from. And basically, it's a mix of cheese, chili, and some sort of, oil and garlic and that sort of thing. But it's sort of a sauce that goes on potatoes. So we boil potatoes and we go on top. And it's normally served as a starter. So the potatoes with the sauce on top is a starter. We put some olives on the side and then some leaf of lettuce on the other side. So it's a sort of a comforting food, very common in Peru. And we can only get this type of sauce probably in London, in the UK, but also when I go home, this is part of my stash when I come back. So I have a last sachet, so I'm keeping it until today. Is it being eaten today?
Oh, right. Okay, so
I was waiting for quantum sauce first.
Nice cheesy sauce.
Yeah.
Very nice. Cool. Thank you very much. Well, enjoy that when the time comes.
Yes, looking forward to it.
We are thinking about sort of the critical supply chains and how we go about managing the logistics and the operational side. You're obviously the expert in that. So have you noticed like a real change in the way that things have happened, or has it just intensified things?
Yes, so definitely. I'm going to present you with some links to the current situation and my area of expertise, which is supply chain and logistics, sort of operations management. Okay, so welcome to this talk for Quantum Source. It's on supply chains and COVID-19 disruption. And I'm Dr. Luisa Huatuco from the University of York. I'm a senior lecturer in operations management at the York Management School. I wanted to go through the basics really of what is supply chain management to start with. in this graph, we have a series of nodes and arrows. It's just an example of a supply chain, in this case of automotive, as a car production. But it can be applied to services as well. It could be applied to any other activities from, say, non-government organizations as well, for profit, not for profit. So the idea is that we always have an end customer. So if you look at the right-hand side of the diagram, the customer is the end user, the final person who is getting the product or getting the service, right? So it's in the case of the car manufacturer, it will be the person who is buying the car. Mm-hmm. So in this diagram, we have several nodes, as we call them, and tiers. Tiers are retailers that serve the customers directly. We have also wholesalers who serve the retailers. And then we have the manufacturers. So I'm going from right to left now in the diagram. So as you move towards the left-hand side, you will find yourself with the components, the raw materials that are needed in order to make, produce, and deliver the products that we all use in our daily life. Perhaps, think about any product, such as a sauce. Yes, so earlier, So how many stages has we gone through before it got to my table, right? Sure. In terms of the the flows that you see, so we have the arrows, they're moving again from left to right. So it means that that's the material flow. So anything that is being dispatched from, say, the raw material supplier to the intermediate component manufacturer, to the manufacturer, wholesaler, retailer, and final customer. But what we want to emphasize as well, that there is a flow of information that goes back as well with the customer requirements, the customer needs, right? So all that goes back in terms of the customer orders and the customer quotation requests and so on. Those are flows that go up the other way into the supply chain. Yeah. So that's why we have this blue bar here. So where you have both type of information flows in terms of information planning and activity integration, which are fundamental, as important as the material flow. And then we have these other arrows at the top, which complement the idea of supply chain management, which is basically the reverse flow, which is of recycling and returns. So once you dispose of the product or end of life product, what do you do with it, and how can it be returned or recycled? So so that's the basics of what we call supply chain management. So why is it relevant today? Well, we have seen, we're still seeing reports on the news about lack of essentials and also, for example, the PPE, personal protective equipment for nurses, for example. And so what we have here is, just two pictures of what we've been probably familiar in the news recently. Okay. So people saying what we need and probably would like to say now, right? Versus what we have, which is only different to what is required. And similarly for the essentials and in the supermarkets, we're only familiar with the pictures of empty shelves and so on. But, things that cannot be made instantly and replenished instantly for us as end consumers to get. So why is it happening? So we have a way of explaining this sort of delay in replenishment. We have these two main paradigms, as we call them in supply chain management. One is the lean paradigm, and the other one is the agile paradigm, and essentially quite different. From the seminal work by Fisher, which is this picture of the front page of the paper that they produced back in '97, but it's in Harvard Business Review, so very much practitioner-driven sort of paper. So you have two different products at a time. The can of soup, for example, as an example of the what we call low-cost, high-volume sort of product. Okay. And then we had the scanner, or the barcode scanner. At that time, it was novel, and it was just, very few of those around. So what we call the high price and low volume, right? So different extremes, if you say, to compare, what sort of supply chain will serve best to each of these products.
It seems that today we've potentially got both of those things, because you've got the kind of, talking about like hospital ventilators and things, which is the high cost items, but then the low cost items like the PPE. So I'm already thinking that that's a complexity in itself, that you've got all these things that need to get taken around in potentially different ways.
Yes, definitely. So you have the most specialized equipment. So the idea in operations and supply chain is that the more customized things are, the more I don't know, in terms of the specialization, technology driven, and knowledge, specialist knowledge required, the more expensive will it become, because it's a little bit more rare. The final product or service will be difficult to imitate, and it's in that condition that you can actually say, okay, well, the price will go up, because there's not many of that you can only afford because of this level of expertise around. Whereas if it's something out of the, for example, the high volume, low cost, then by all means you have this idea of efficiency. And that's what I wanted to link actually with Lean, because that's the principle that relies on economies of scale. So the more you produce, the unit cost will drop dramatically, and therefore you can make more of those. But again, Lean is only really serves its purpose or when you have normal conditions and very stable conditions. Whereas Agile supply chain is all about innovation and responsiveness to market.
Includes in the name,
Yeah. So I wanted to make that difference. So perhaps the links with the production of the canned soup, and the Agile probably with any new technology that we now have, but it's very expensive. So linking the two types of product, which Fisher called them functional products versus innovative products, and the types of supply chain, which is efficient, so that's the cost-driven supply chain or low cost, versus a responsive supply chain, which is based on agility. We have these match and mismatch quadrants. So what we were talking earlier about examples of the PPE, the masks, the gloves, or the gowns, they all low unit cost, high volumes of them are needed, but also produced. So in normal conditions, it's fine to have an efficient supply chain based on Lean and just in time and zero waste and that sort of thing. But when it comes to a situation like we're facing now, which is during the disruption of the pandemic, what we're looking for is a agile supply chain, so something that can respond to our needs right now. And that's obviously, as we see here, is a mismatch. It's a difficult thing to achieve by design, because if you remember the graph earlier about the different stages of the supply chain, at each stage there will be organizations doing that planning of their inventory, how much they got to produce, how much they got to deliver. So each of those nodes that we saw earlier, or those circles that we saw earlier, they are actually delays. So in time, so the longer the supply chain is, and if you're talking about global supply chains and you add the international dimension, that's even much, in terms of, it doesn't make it agile at all. So it's quite hard. So that's the explanation, understanding why by design some of these supply chains are a better place than others for the type of products that we use and purchase. So I wanted to link that background to the what I've been researching also a bit on disruptions, which is not in particularly, I didn't envisage the pandemic, but we had a bit of research on natural disasters, flooding, earthquakes, that sort of disruption to the channels of distribution of the supply chain. And while we were thinking about that in that project, that was a few years ago now, but got us thinking of how different types of supply chain could react and pan out during the disruption and also afterwards. So in this graph, I hope it's not too complicated, but we got the time dimension at the bottom. So we got time 1, time 2, time 3, as we go in the future. And on the y-axis, we have the system performance. So for us, the system performance is a supply chain. The system is a supply chain. The performance would be, for example, the level of output. How many products, or if you're talking about manufacturing, how many products can we deliver, or how many products can we make sure they are available for the
how many loaves of bread make it to the supermarket shelves?
That's right. So you have that level of performance. And when the disruption happens, so this red line here in the vertical axis, you got disruption happening at a particular point in time 1, how different types of supply chains could behave, right? So if you got a robust supply chain, it won't be affected at all, right? So it just carries on despite the disruption, and then there's nothing has changed. So that's an ideal situation. When you have a resilient supply chain, is where the disruption occurs and there's a drop in the output. In this case, for, as you mentioned, the quantity of of bread being produced, and then it picks up slowly. So it's a time lag between time 1 and time 3 in this case, where things are not normal. Things are having dropped to a point where it's still going, but actually at lower pace. And then you find this, after time 3, you have this continuity into a new normality. So it's not at the same level as it was before. Before the disruption, it's slightly lower. But anyway, you might think perhaps maybe some other systems or supply chains might even go higher if they have a new way of operating and they discover new ways of doing things. But just to ensure that different levels are there. And then we have the non-resilient, basically supply chain, which is affected by the disruption, but then it never recovers. It gradually deteriorates, and there is no way up. There's no way to come back to any new normal. And then the stream of a case of a supply chain which is completely destroyed with a disruption, there is no opportunity to pick up again. So just examples, if there are local supply chains and something major happens, like an earthquake or tsunami or major sort of thing, and it wipes out all the buyer-seller network or supply chain, in that case, that could be quite severe. So we are thinking, trying to connect this with the current situation. So where are we in terms of PPE supply chain, and where are we with the food essential supply chain? So one would like to see, right? People are talking about new normality. So hopefully we are in this resilient sort of area where obviously we've seen the effects. We probably at the beginning we have been quite low. Obviously now picking up a little bit. But still having problems. The news are now about care homes needing PPE and how that is actually being postponed for a while after giving priority to the hospitals, for example. So all these things is not completely solved in terms of the use of these items. So some solutions and initiatives that have been basically being emerging from the community as part of what do we do with this pandemic and how do we solve things, whereas we cannot wait for businesses and interconnectivity to take place that quickly and to solve a problem right now. Because if you remember, in the start of the supply chain network, the end customer, is the patient. The end customer will be us as consumers of goods from the supermarket. So if those things are not there, how communities are reacting to this and how they are using technology to make those connections and to ensure that the shortages are not so severe. So there have been calls for small, medium enterprises from the manufacturing community to actually step in and have some funding from government, but also they have been offering their support if they have the capability. So this example of 3D printing of face shields is actually a small medium enterprise company, had a 3D printer, and they are now connecting through technology the different stages of, okay, do you want to make a donation? Do you want to become a volunteer? Or you want to request some of these products yourself? So, and then for the food example, so we have seen many more examples of solidarity and community to community. So it's not like in the typical traditional way that we are expecting the corporations or the businesses to serve the people or the customers, but now it's sort of an emerging behavior of person to person or user to user sort of vision. This has been actually called the civic or citizen supply chain. So it's person to person rather than waiting for the businesses to provide. And this one, a good example on the list, Chinese students have been proactive at when they heard about care homes being in shortage of PPE. They actually gathered together online and make sure they organize themselves with donations from the own masks that family have sent them from China because they had a pandemic much earlier. So yes, the students feeling the need to help the community to the most obviously vulnerable people. And because of this time delay, it wasn't happening right now in terms of the government providing them. So they stepped in and did this for the care homes in Leeds. So
right on, good to them.
So it's quite impressive. I thought that takes a lot of organization, but they all did it with very, very much care and hope and lots of nice messages while they were donating these things. So
one thing I was just wondering there, that you sort of bridge into this sort of community activity and a community response. When we saw that, supermarket shelves did get empty, that was when the supermarket's supply chain was moving into this sort of resilient curve. And I wonder how much you think that it was brought out of that resilient curve by the kind of efforts of the supply chains of the supermarket, or was it more of people realizing that, look, we really can't stockpile this stuff, we've really got to let the supermarket recover? So was it sort of the kind of company-led thing or the community-led issue?
So when we started feeling the effects, I think it was. I think the businesses have been much slower. I'm not saying they have not managed to serve the most vulnerable in terms of the food provision, but still, if you try to buy online nowadays, they're probably facing with the same problem. It's difficult to find, for example, slot deliveries and so on. So they put you in a queue, like you had to wait, logged in for a while. But there are supermarkets who have been quite proactive about, going through what they call register yourself sort of solution. But it's been slower. It's been much slower than the community feeling the need and, helping people around them. So, so that's an emergent behavior. And in all systems theories and books, you will find that as a characteristics of a system. So anything that's emerging hasn't been thought it could be good, it could be bad. So again, in this case, it's positive. So it's good.
Cool. Well, power to the people.
So hopefully we hope that we're coming through the crisis, but we'll see. So also to add to this is obviously the expertise from universities. And while I was looking at how we have been engaging especially with the themes of food and the health supplies. So the government has been asking for participants from all universities as advisors. So we have from the innate agri-food academics. So this is research-intensive universities such as Durham, Leeds, York, Liverpool, Sheffield. They have these groups already running for understanding how food systems work globally. And they have been looking at the ways of how this particular pandemic will affect the different stages in the supply chain, because obviously some of the food cannot be grown in the UK, for example, and will have to rely on other countries' production systems to be up and running. And that might take time because it's a different situation there, and they might need help, sort of thing. So it's just all these balances. And when you take a systemic view, you tend to have a look at the possibilities of one change in the system really affecting the whole system. So so that's from the N8 Agri-Food Academics. At least I'm aware that from the newsletters and they've been sent, they're actually researchers in the SAGE committees from the university and providing a lot of advice on how to deal with different aspects of the pandemic. So from global health, from public health, but also from other aspects like policy and transport and those areas that they're all related. When now we are planning, well, we are actually easing the lockdown, hopefully there will be some sort of scientific advice behind it, so that we are doing it safely. And then the example here. From the Institute for Manufacturing from the University of Cambridge. They produce a regular newsletter, and one that caught my eye was this one on the connecting healthcare and manufacturing and the different challenges. And in fact, they have been quite proactive, connected the different dots, because they say, okay, we have all this capability in manufacturing, which perhaps is not being used to its full capacity, whereas there's a massive need in the healthcare system where they are requesting for this PPE and other things that to be made, and how to make those connections, and that has helped quite a lot in the response to this challenge of the pandemic. And also things like innovation, creativity, anything to make it work. And I think there was something about the bulb for ventilators that was made. I think with some ideas from Leeds as well, but from Italy. And so they have made use of a simple 3D printing part, just to make use of that ventilator and double the capacity immediately. So all this thinking out of the box is incredible. It's just cool. Some of these things that might not have been thought through before because we didn't have the need. Now, because we have the need, we become more creative, more innovative. I'm thinking, what can we do now? We need it now, and that's a pressing issue. So that's my few minutes talk on this. But if you have any questions, I'll be happy to respond to you by email. But also, I am aware Adam has a Twitter quantum source connection there, so we can get back to him and he will forward those to me.
Okay, so thanks very much, Louisa, for the talk. It's amazing how you can take this stuff for granted, and on the face of it, it sounds mundane, but actually it's just a real call for innovation and people to sort of get creative about this. It's really interesting to hear you talk about that. I did have a couple of questions myself, if I can.
Yes, please.
The first, I don't want to get sort of too political or anything, but when a politician makes a claim that they're going to have, 100,000 units of PPE in by the end of the week, how much do people within the supply chain community kind of go like, oh, this is a nightmare, why has he said that?
Yeah, so same. Yeah, I think at every stage in the supply chain, there is some possibility of inventories, so stocks and so on, but they need to be looked after. And I think I was reading the news yesterday about there was some stockpiling on in terms of PPE, but unfortunately they were probably not kept in the best conditions, and they also became obsolete. So all these things, especially with I'm just thinking of the other example I gave as well in terms of food. You have this pressing need of obviously best before date, that sort of thing. So, but same for I was talking about protective equipment, personal protective equipment. Those conditions have to be met in order to obviously retain the quality of the product and to make it to be effective when it's being used, or delivered or to the end user. And I think that's actually something that perhaps there is a bit of sometimes over-promising when we know that in practice things take time. They're not going to be completely, automated, and things are going to run, smoothly. I was just also looking at a video yesterday from a driver who was saying he was waiting for hours every day because people couldn't find things in the warehouse, so the PPE or the right thing that they could use. So, like, we are aware of these things. It's not perfect.
Yeah.
We still got the technology. We could organize it better.
I heard something on the radio that said, a general advice to politicians would be to actually under-promise and over-deliver, whereas it always seems to come the other way around.
The other way around. The people get geared up for it, and and then it's like, oh, it didn't happen. 100,000 tests per day or something. Everybody's like, wow. So that would be better in a way to be cautious about what's been promised, because in this online world that we are all in, it's just the perception that things happen instantly, and as you press the button, it's going to go through your door, and it's because we are dealing with, as I explained, different stages in the supply chain, the delays, the planning, there's information to go on, there's different types of layers to go through before it gets to us.
Yeah, absolutely. There was the other question I wanted to ask you was that this sort of links back to when we could do quantum source in the real world. And so one of the talks that we got around Christmas time was how drone technology could potentially help Father Christmas deliver Christmas presents.
Nice idea. Yeah, I like that.
So the guy talking, Dr. Bilal Kadou, he was saying that, drone technology could be used to help distribute supplies and blood transfusions and things like this between hospitals. Is this drone technology something that is actively being considered within your branch of research, or is this still science fiction?
Yeah, definitely. Artificial intelligence and related innovative technologies are being explored actively in operations and supply chain management. So just an example, again, through watching the news, they were saying that in the US, they have this prescription delivery carried out by drone. So people avoid the contact, going to obviously GP, then pharmacy, then going back home. So the drones are basically cutting out stages in the supply chain and directly serving the customer or the end user, in this case, the patient, and providing it safely. So whatever, I don't know, the capacity of the drone, it does how much weight it can carry, but prescriptions seem to be one of those that can be light enough to be carried around and be accurately delivered.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll leave you to your morning now and just say thank you very much again for your talk. It's been really interesting, really revealing. I would say to anyone out there, I would reiterate Louisa's advice that if you do want to put anything to her, hit us up at the Quantum Source Twitter account, or and I'll send the questions off to Louisa and we'll get back to you. But with that, Louisa, we'll say thank you and enjoy your cheesy sauce for the weekend.
Oh, yes, I'm looking forward to this. Thank you so much. Thank you, Adam.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So thanks very much to Louisa, and I have to say that talk went places that I totally wasn't expecting it to. It was this really awesome clarion call for community spirit and research innovation. So to the community spiriters and to the research innovators, keep up the good work. This one's for you. Let's build on what you've done in the post-lockdown world, which soon, eh? Let's do it. If you like that, then keep your eyes peeled at the Quantum Source Twitter and Instagram feeds. We will be posting more fascinating facts and educational entertainment in the next few weeks. Just remains for me to say that I've been Dr. Adam Booth. This has been Quantum Source. You've been great. Stay cool.